Oh boy, it's the ancient world of the 7th century BC, a time in history when the common belief was that any natural disaster would happen because of the supernatural. A lightning bolt strikes your friend on the head. Zeus! Your friend Jim Bob's boat was destroyed by a hurricane at sea. Poseidon, damn you! This was the Homeric worldview, and yes, it is named of the one and only Homer. No, not that one. Sorry, not sorry. The one who wrote the famous Odyssey and the Iliad, and you probably had to read them in high school. Well, what if I told you that there was another worldview besides the Homer worldview that was beginning to form? That's right. I'm of course talking about the Malaysian worldview, and our story begins in the thriving port city of Miletus. Now, around 624 BC, one man was born in this city. You know him? The man, the myth, the legend, Thales. Now imagine if this was the environment you lived in. Ah, what a beautiful sunset. Thanks, Helios. What a good crop season. Thanks, Demeter. Hey, Thales, why aren't you thanking the gods? Well, because what if there is a natural explanation for a lot of these things? Now, Thales had many theories about the world, but his most famous, of course, is that water is the fundamental substance of all things. Nature, people, or animals, you name it, it can all be traced back to water. He then began to think about his theory in practice and whether it could be more plausible than the beliefs that gods cause natural events. And so, what did he think of? Well, he thought of earthquakes, of course. Well, what if instead of earthquakes being caused by angry Poseidon, they're actually caused by water? Wait, water? Yeah. What if the Earth sat like a log or a ship floating on an infinite ocean in space, and the rough waters that shook this massive pile of land caused the earthquakes? Now you may think that sounds a little dumb, especially by today's standards, but you have to understand that this level of theorizing of the natural world at the time was actually pretty genius. Now here's the thing about Thales. Most things we know about him were written centuries later by philosophers like Herodotus and Diogenes. No, not that one. And also the famous Aristotle. So although we know about some of his theories and ideas, a big part of his life is speculated about by historians and past philosophers. For example, let's talk about the city Miletus. We do know that Miletus was a very successful city and major hub for trading in the Mediterranean. And you know what that means? The spread of knowledge. What we also know about this time is that civilizations in Africa and the Middle East excelled in astronomy and mathematics. The Babylonians in particular had been observing the universe and documenting it for centuries at this point. They did this for so long that they started to recognize and track patterns and eventually developed the Saros cycle to track the Earth's alignment. So with that in mind, it is speculated and believed that Thales got educated by traveling to Babylon or Egypt because their knowledge far exceeded Greece at the time. It is said that he visited Egypt to study the pyramids and geometry. According to Diogenes, Thales was able to calculate the height of the pyramids by using his own shadow and the shadow of the pyramid at the same time. He then most likely went to the city of Babylon, where he was able to study the astronomy and observations that the Babylonians had been dealing with for centuries at this point. He then went back to Miletus and got busy. He started working and even established the Malaysian School of Philosophy, which had famous students like Anaximander and then later down the line Anaximenes. Thales began spreading his wisdom and knowledge to Greece and would eventually become one of the 7 sages or wise men of Greece. Now, one of the other wise men in Greece was Solon, so let's go see what he's up to. Oh boy, Athens was in the middle of internal chaos, including problems of aristocratic control of land ownership, debt slavery, class conflict, and the unpopular legal code. And Solon was put in charge of all of it as the chief magistrate. All right, let's get busy. Solon began reforming and laid the groundwork for Cleisthenes to become the father of Athenian democracy several decades later. One of Solon's reforms was abolishing debt slavery, a huge achievement, as well as organizing other institutional reforms. Now, how does Solon relate to Thales? Well, the story goes something like this. As Solon was reforming, he visited Thales in 594 BC to perhaps get some wisdom and advice. Hey Thales, you got a minute? For liberty and democracy! Woo! Oh. Hey Solon. Anyways, Thales, I've come to ask for your wisdom and opinions on my reform. Hey, wait a minute. Where's your family? I don't have one. What? You never got married and had a family? Well, why not? Then a messenger came into the room and said, Solon, I regret to inform you that your son has just died. What? No, this can't be. It's okay, I can take it from here. Look, Solon, your son isn't actually dead. He isn't? You, Solon, are a wise man, a beautiful man. As wise men, both of us wish to find the joys and explanations of life, but even someone as wise as you still grieves and cannot find a way out of that pain and loss. You do not truly have a family because it can be taken from you. Only knowledge and wisdom can be yours because nobody can take that from you. And so that is why I don't have a family and will never experience such pain. Now, although the two wise men most likely visited each other, that story comes from more text from Diogenes, so think of it more as a possibility rather than a fact. Wait a minute, I thought you said you was going to predict an eclipse. Well, don't you worry, because it's time. At this point, the year is around 590 BC, and the map went from this to this. As Thales continued to study, the Medes had been expanding westward to the kingdom of Lydia. The fighting between the two sides mostly occurred along the Thales River, and for 4 years Thales' reputation continues to grow, and through his work and knowledge of astronomical records, patterns, and studying lunar cycles, around 586 BC, he predicts that an eclipse would happen sometime in the spring of 585 BC. And then, it happened. What is to later be called the Battle of the Eclipse occurred as Medes and Lydians were fighting when all of a sudden the day turned night, and both sides, terrified, immediately signed a peace and recognized the Thales River as the border. And just like that, with 5 to 6 years of fighting, a simple event like the moon going in front of the sun halted all hostilities. News of this would eventually spread, and it reaffirmed Thales' non-mythical explanations of the natural world. So what did he do after this? The later part of his life is much more of a mystery. He most likely just continued his work on math and astronomy, and he did develop a key geometric idea like Thales' theorem. And by the time it was around 550 BC, Cyrus the Great had just overthrown the Median Empire, and so now the Persian Empire was getting born. Herodotus tells us that Thales traveled as part of Croesus' campaign to cross the Thales River in 546 BC, and that Thales was an engineer and consultant. It is also said that he used a river bend technique of splitting the water into a smaller stream so his men could get across the river without a traditional bridge. Unfortunately for Thales and Croesus, the kingdom of Lydia would soon fall within the next year to the Persians, and soon after that, the traditional death date for Thales is in the same year, 546 BC. What an interesting man he was. Anyways, hope you enjoyed.